tell you about her. Okay, I'll tell you about my mother-in-law.
Okay, would you like to share the case?
Okay. You want me to stay?
Yeah.
Yes, stand up and present yourself.
I'll share how difficult it was to make a decision with my mother-in-law. She had had complications from diabetes and had gallbladder surgery, and she never recovered. She spent most of her time in intensive care, and she was just not getting better. And the night that she was, and all the time when she was sick, all she would kept saying was, do something. I had no clue what that meant, or what she really wanted. And there was when the night she was dying, there was nobody there except me. And I'm just her daughter-in-law. And they were going to do a code on her. And I'm going like, no, you can't do this, because this is not what she would want. And so I did ask the priest if was that okay? And he said, he talked about the extraordinary needs. So that's what I'm saying, it's so difficult if you don't know ahead of time what a person might be wanting, if you don't talk about it. Because then, I just feel like nobody want to talk about it. If you just ignore it, maybe it'll go away. And so I guess that's why this is so important to know. You've got to talk about these things so you don't end up making the wrong decision or wondering, I wondered for a long time that I made the right decision. So that's my story.
Yeah. Can you talk at all about benefits and burdens that were involved in that
yes.
situation?
Okay. I don't know what the benefit would have been. I guess the benefit would have been, I can't see that there would have been a benefit for doing the code. The burden would have been very difficult for her because she was so sick and she was not getting better and she was suffering a lot. So I think the burden was very obvious what that would have been. The benefit maybe would have been for her family, the rest of her family, to be there and be able to say goodbye to her, and that might have been some benefit for her family. But they weren't there at the time, so I think the burden on her outweighed the benefit for her family to be able to say goodbye.
Okay, thank you.
What is it called? I don't know.
Okay, resuscitation.
Oh, Henry.
Yeah, resuscitation, yeah. Okay, would anyone else like to share a case? Again, the session today is meant for your personal benefit. Yes?
Going through a mother with Alzheimer's, very difficult. The only response she ever had was, I want to go home. And couldn't go home because of safety factors. It's hard when children work, both, to take care of parents or to hire somebody to be there 24/7. But in the Alzheimer's, when she finally decided, I don't want to eat, I'm not going to eat, would throw her food, not a thermometer, but would throw food at us.
Yeah.
And do those kinds of things. It was like, leave her alone. Just leave her alone. And they were very good. Hospice people and I think nursing home people, if you're in the right place, are very good at preparing you for what's going to come. And when she refused to quit eating, they said it will be within 2 weeks. The natural process is what we talked about. But I guess my question, and maybe this comes later, is with all of our faculties we have now, we're sitting in this room and we can still make decisions. Do these things need to be notarized? Or do they just need to be told because emotions take over with children and people who try to make those decisions for you? So is that, just the living will that don't touch me, don't do this? I guess that's my biggest question of being here today. Okay.
The most important thing is to have the conversations between the patient and the family. That's primary. Again, you can use legal documents, advance directives, which we're going to be talking about, to sort of codify in a legal way your wishes. And that can be helpful in terms of informing other people about, especially healthcare professionals, about what is and isn't wanted, and also in terms of preventing conflicts within families about what should be done. But the first and foremost thing to do is to have the conversation and to know what the person wants and to engage in advanced discussion and planning. Now, in terms of stopping eating at the end of life, people say who work in nursing homes will tell you that very often residents will reach a point where they say, I'm just not hungry anymore. And that's just a natural part of the body shutting down in the dying process. Okay, and that's very, very different from, say, somebody deliberately deciding not to eat with the intent of bringing about their death. So we've got to be careful about that distinction. Again, it can just be a part of the natural process of dying where people just don't want to eat anymore.
But Alzheimer's is like she was saying, my mother had Alzheimer's, and they do. Even though they might be hungry, they think they're already eaten. So how do you?
Okay.
You should have the conversation before they get to that point. Is
Well, say with Alzheimer's patients, sometimes too, you need to try to modify the food you're giving them so it's more appealing to them. And it's been found, say, that when somebody is in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, advanced stages, using a feeding tube has not been proven to extend their life over just hand feeding them as they've been taking the food. So say for people working in nursing homes, they may have to learn skills in terms of feeding Alzheimer's patients and in terms of providing foods that are really tasty and palatable to them. Okay, so that would be the way of handling that situation.
We had, my husband and I had my mother-in-law for 2 years with Alzheimer's. And I took some classes. And one thing I learned was they said, if you're taking care of an Alzheimer's patient, whatever journey they're on that day, get on the same journey because it makes no difference. You can't reason with them, when they're advanced. Now, my mother-in-law quit eating. I fed her, and her son fed her. But then she got, she was done.
Yeah.
She would drink, and would get insured and all the health stuff. But when she was done, she was just done.
So again, the thinking is feed the advanced Alzheimer's patients as they are able to take food. Okay, as they are able to take it. So you're not just abandoning them,
No.
but still addressing them where they are in terms of
You're still treating them with what they want and respect. That's what matters,
Right.
Yeah.
And same with feeding tubes too. That can be very, very personal. You just stick in the tube and you leave people alone. Versus, say, hand feeding people, even if they can only take a little
bit.
Because that's social, it's a social interaction with the person. Yeah. Okay, any other comments or questions you'd like to raise at this point? Yes?
And I always wondered if when the decision was made for us, but I was trying to make sure judgment before it was made for us, the risk the ventilator that was keeping her alive, and she continued to breathe after that, and then developed pneumonia. And they said, well, you can treat or not treat this. And they didn't see recovery from the stroke. And she was in her 90s and all that. And so I was going by the definition of the time, well, antibiotics are ordinary things, what is the correct thing in this interpretation that with no reasonable chance of recovery to what she was living like before? Is an antibiotic considered something you do for oil and death comes because of
Okay. Antibiotics are a special case because on the one hand, they can be life-prolonging in terms of treating infections, but also antibiotics can be part of comfort care. That if you treat the infection, you're making the person more comfortable. And again, comfort care is always a benefit to the person. So again, say if you're dealing with someone who's say on chemotherapy, and they've got some bad side effects for the chemotherapy, they also develop pneumonia, you might want to treat the pneumonia with antibiotics because that's going to make them more comfortable. At the same time that you might want to forego further chemotherapy. So again, you always have to look at what's going to be the benefits and burdens of the particular treatment.
I'm still not sure I understand for her, though, like if she's unconscious, you know, there's some, I've also where like pneumonia can be the friend of the dying person.
Okay.
Because it makes it come when it's coming.
The old person's friend. So again, in that case, I would say you would have to assess whether the antibiotics were providing any real comfort care for her or not, or if she was unconscious and out of it and it didn't make any difference. But again, you're right that at one time pneumonia was called the old person's friend because it did serve to bring about death in a natural way for people who were in very debilitating conditions. Okay, does that help at all? Okay.
Janine, I think we had one to the front.
Okay, yes.
My mother was diabetic, and it got to the point where she had lost most of her eyesight, had no peripheral vision, and then the people were close. And she developed problems with her kidneys. So she went on dialysis, which was very difficult because it just drained her, just absolutely drained her. And she did that for a number of weeks. And then, unfortunately, she got gangrene in her feet. And the doctors wanted to amputate, at least some toes, and she absolutely refused that. And so we just let go. And then one day she woke up and she looked at me and I said, well, you have dialysis today. And she says, I'm not going. And I said, well, your nurse will go with you. And she said, no. I said, you're telling me that you're ready to leave me? And she didn't answer the question. I said, well, I will call you when it's about time for you to go to dialysis. And if you still feel this way, then that's what we will do.
Okay, so again, the dialysis had bad side effects for her.
She couldn't walk. I mean, it was awful.
Okay, again, in that case, it looks like the dialysis was really excessively burdensome for her.
Yes.
And that it was morally permissible for her to make a decision, I'm not going to do this anymore. Okay, fine. Yes? Yeah.
Now, I understand if you're in the hospice, they don't treat anything. But would they give you an antibiotic if you had an infection?
Okay, again, I think if it were part of comfort care, that's different from making a decision about using it for going life-sustaining treatments.
So even though you're in hospice, they would?
Okay, again, you have to talk with the particular hospice you're working with. But my feelings are that wouldn't necessarily be precluded. Okay. And sometimes now people, because of the good care they get from hospice, graduate out of hospice. Okay, but that can happen. Greg, I passed out to the table an article about Cardinal Joseph Bernadette. Some of you maybe remember him. He was from Chicago, and while he was cardinal, he contracted cancer, and he had to make decisions about using it for going medical treatments. And I wrote that up as a really good illustration of how you apply these principles we've been talking about using it for going life-sustaining treatments based on benefits and burdens. So I wanted to share that with you as an example of modeling church teaching on life-sustaining treatment.